Last time we talked about the lymphatic system and the different components of the lymphatic system, the lymphatic vessels, as well as the lymphatic organs, and their role that they play in reabsorbing the interstitial fluid in the spaces between the cells, in the tissues, and how that fluid is absorbed by those vessels or those lymphatic capillaries. And once it's absorbed into those capillaries, how that lymph fluid is then returned to the blood circulatory system. But first, it's filtered through lymph nodes and lymph nodules, filtered, and all of the bacteria and foreign particles and waste particles are removed from that fluid before it's returned to the circulatory system. And so I also mentioned how the lymphatic system is very closely associated with the immune system because it's in the lymphatic organs of the bone marrow and in the thymus where these white blood cells that play a big role in our immune system are produced and also stored. And so in this part of the lecture, we'll talk about the innate immune system, that portion of the immune system that is readily available when we're born, and then the adaptive immune system, that part of the immune system that adapts to specific foreign invaders, certain bacteria and viruses that our body can recognize and then remember for subsequent exposure so that the reaction time to those organisms is much decreased. The learning outcomes for this portion of the lecture is to be able to understand the role of the innate immune system, as well as list examples of the body's innate defenses. Immunity is the killing or removing of foreign substances, pathogens, and also cancer cells from the body. And so, as a whole, the immune system is responsible for ridding the body of these materials that can either cause disease or cause infection. There are two major branches of our immune system. That's the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. The innate system is fully functional at birth. And so without any previous exposure to specific antigens, this immune system or this branch of the immune system um, serves to either protect our bodies from the entrance of pathogens and foreign substances into our body, or prevent them from causing disease. And with this system, there's no memory whatsoever that's involved. And so the mechanisms that are in place in the innate immune defenses do not serve to remember any of these pathogens or foreign substances so that it can respond faster in a subsequent exposure. But the adaptive immune system, um, this system is initiated when exposed to a pathogen and memory is built up. And so some pathogens or foreign substances can be detected by the adaptive immune system, and the cells that are involved in the adaptive immune system will build up a memory for these pathogens or foreign substances so that upon subsequent exposure to these same pathogens or foreign substances, they can respond faster and stronger so that the infection is cleared sooner than later. This table shows you the innate immune responses and different mechanisms that are in place for the innate immune responses, and also the mechanisms that are involved in the adaptive immune response. And so the innate immune response, we can think of these responses as lines of defense, like going to war. You have your first line of defense. If your enemy gets past the first line of defense, then they're faced with the second line of defense. And if they get past that second line, then they're faced with the strongest and most powerful third line of defense. And so the innate immune response is non-specific because it does not build up specific memory for these foreign invaders at this point. The non-specific immune response is made up of the first line of defenses and also the second line of defenses. And so we'll talk about each of these first and second lines of defenses and a few examples from each before we go into the adaptive immune response. The first line of defense, the immune response to non-specific antigens, can be seen in a number of different physical and chemical barriers that are naturally part of our bodies. For example, chemical barriers that exist in our tears and other secretions called lysozyme. These are enzymes that are known to break down proteins and break down cells like bacterial cells. Rapid changes in pH when you're going from the esophagus into the stomach. And so, in the stomach we have this very low pH of 2. It's very, very acidic. And so we have this rapid change in pH when going from the esophagus to the stomach, and then another change in pH when we're going from the stomach to the esophagus when the pH is going from very acidic to very, very basic. And so these rapid changes in pH are detrimental to the well-being of bacteria, which is good for us and bad for them. There are also physical barriers that prevent the foreign materials, bacteria and other foreign materials, from even entering into our bodies. Our skin is a physical barrier. Fatty acids and normal flora, normal bacteria that normally live on the surface of our skin, they produce enzymes that help our skin and our bodies defend itself against other bacteria that are trying to attach to our skin and enter into our bodies to set up infection. And so the bacteria that are normally found in and on our bodies serve that purpose to protect us from foreign invaders. We have cilia, little hairs in our nasopharynx, in our nasal passages that trap particles and trap bacteria that are breathed into our system to prevent them from going further down into our lungs and setting up infection. We have a mucus lining in our trachea, the trachea of our respiratory system, that catches these particles so that they don't go down into our lungs. We also have normal flora in our digestive tracts, and that is also a physical barrier, as well as the flushing of our urinary tract with urine. And so as we urinate, as urine travels through through the kidneys and it goes through the bladder and is flushed out of our urinary tract. That is a physical washing out of um, any foreign invaders that may have entered through our urinary tract. The second line of defense consists of a number of different components, the natural killer cells, fever, inflammation, a protein called interferon, and another protein called complement, as well as the phagocytosis that we've talked about before. And so we'll see how a couple of these different secondary defenses work to help fight against infection. The first system that we'll talk about is this inflammatory response and the steps in the inflammatory response. The inflammatory response is well known as having redness, heat, swelling, and pain localized in a certain area when there has been some type of damage to the skin or tissue. And what happens during the inflammatory response is that in the first step, the injured tissue cells as well as other cells called mast cells that are located in the tissue will release something called histamine. And this histamine is a signal that causes the capillaries, the blood capillaries, to dilate and increase blood flow. So the dilation of these blood vessels near the injured tissue is going to cause an increase in blood flow to that area. That increase in blood flow it serves to bring more white blood cells, more platelets, more things like that, so that this damage can start to be repaired. And so things like macrophages, these white blood cells that phagocytize pathogens, they will come to the infected or injured site of the tissue to phagocytize the pathogens. And so you see here, this macrophage can engulf these pathogens that have found their way into the tissues through that injured site. And so these macrophages, they'll help to clean up the mess here at the injured site by phagocytizing these macrophages, by phagocytizing the bacteria, as well as certain neutrophils will also play a role in phagocytizing pathogens, as well as releasing cytokines. These cytokines are chemical messages that are released by white blood cells into the tissues so that they can be detected by other white blood cells to come to the rescue, to come and help out and help fight that infection. And so you see these cytokines being released by these macrophages and neutrophils, and then what happens is they cause these other white cells that are in the blood vessels to leave the blood vessels and enter into the tissues so that they too can help with the fighting of the infection. So the other part of this inflammatory response is that blood clotting occurs. So the other formed elements of the blood, the platelets, these platelets are going to form blood clots, and so that they can seal the walls of any damaged capillaries to help prevent blood loss. And so the redness that is known in the inflammatory response, the redness is due to the increase in blood flow as well as the heat and swelling. So there's an increase in blood flow which causes the redness, the heat, and the swelling. And also, um, in addition to the increase in blood flow, there's an increase of fluid that's lost by the circulatory vessels because of these white cells that are released into the infected area, as well as other fluids that are released into that infected area. And so this causes the redness, the heat, the swelling, and the pain is caused by this increase in blood volume, increase in fluid volume, pressing on nerves in this area of injured tissue. So here are some questions for you to check your progress. List some examples of the body's innate defenses. Um, Explain how the inflammatory response works, and then why the affected area has redness, heat, swelling, and pain. Write these answers down in your notebook, and we will review them on Thursday together in class.